All the Young Dudes, Sirius's Perspective by Rollercosterwords. Chapter 33, Second Year, Discoveries. Narcissa and Regulus may have promised not to report back to his parents, but Walpurga Black definitely still had a source of information somewhere at Hogwarts. A few days after the Gryffindor vs. Slytherin match, Sirius received a howler at breakfast. He kept his composure as it screamed, grinning when James put his hands on his hips and imitated his mother's severe expression. The boy opened and closed his mouth, comedically exaggerated, as if he were the one screaming. By the time the letter had ripped itself up, Sirius was laughing too hard to care about anything it had actually said. With his hair restored and the knowledge that the worst his mother could do was send a howler, Sirius felt untouchable once more. He hadn't forgotten the threat of Durmstrang, but while it had felt very real and very immediate when he was back home, that simply wasn't the case at Hogwarts. Surrounded by his friends, spending every night in the cosy Gryffindor common room, chatting with his professors and laughing in the Great Hall, Sirius just couldn't believe that his parents would actually ever send him away. Every Black had gone to Hogwarts, and he knew how his family felt about breaking tradition. So Sirius returned to mischief-making with a vengeance. He raided the kitchens, he left ink-sprayed quills between pages of library books, he scattered dung bombs frequently throughout the dungeons. He and James spent half their time together under the invisibility cloak, either pranking other students or exploring the castle and adding to the Marauders' map. They snuck out to Honeydukes at least 3 times a week, eating so many sweets that Sirius started to get sick of the chocolate frogs. His mother continued to send howlers, but this only bolstered his confidence. Sirius had become more and more convinced that Durmstrang was just an empty threat. After all, he'd stepped many toes out of line at this point, and he was still in Hogwarts. He began to wonder if Durmstrang had been a fiction to make him step in line. Perhaps the betrothal wasn't quite so set as his family might have had him believe. Surely, if his parents saw that nothing could ruin him, not even an awful Christmas break, then they would realize that he wasn't fit at all to be married, that it was better to leave him out of the family matters altogether. Either way, James seemed delighted to have Sirius back to his old self. The two of them were thick as thieves. Any time not devoted to mischief-making was devoted to mischief-scheming. Peter tried to involve himself where he could, of course, which Sirius found a bit annoying. But even Pete was growing on him, especially after one night when the nervous boy managed to distract Filch by pretending that he had been knocked into the closet by Peeves. Remus, on the other hand, had returned to being a swot. He actually started spending time in the library, which had previously been the only spot in the castle that he avoided. He wasn't the same as last year. He wasn't using schoolwork as an excuse to ditch them, and he would still join them every now and then on a prank. He seemed to just really care about his grades for some reason. He was too pig-headed to be peer-pressured into slacking off, and although Sirius would have liked to spend more time with his friend, it was quite nice to know that they could count on Remus to lend notes or let the rest of them copy his homework if they'd been out late maraudering. Of course, Sirius couldn't dedicate all of his time to mischief. There were still classes to attend and assignments to complete, or copy, and James had Quidditch to keep him busy, and Peter had chess, and Remus had academic pursuits. But that was all right, because after the success of the Lions, Sirius was ready to move on to his next big project. He'd been thinking about it since Christmas break, and had come to the decision he was going to fix Remus. Well, not fix, actually, but help. He was going to find a way to stop Remus from hurting himself when he transformed. He'd been turning the problem over in his mind since their conversation about the scars. Remus thought he attacked himself, because there was nothing else around to attack, but Sirius thought there must be more to it than that. It wasn't as if every werewolf in the country managed to attack someone every full moon, at least he didn't think so, and he'd never heard about werewolves hurting themselves before, although, to be fair, he'd never really learnt too much about werewolves aside from the basics. So he wasn't prowling about under the invisible cloak with Peter and James, sitting in class or bothering Remus for his notes. Sirius was undertaking a comprehensive study on werewolves. To be honest, there wasn't much. Most of the books in the library just repeated the same information, Lycanthropy was a disease that spread through biting. It could only be transmitted from werewolf to human. The transformation was caused by the full moon, and there was no cure. Sirius learnt about a couple interesting differences between werewolves and regular wolves, and there are a few illustrations, but they were so wildly varied that they didn't give him much of an idea of what Remus might look like. The best information he was able to find was from a chapter of an upper-level Defense Against the Dark Arts book, which dealt primarily with how to battle dangerous magical creatures, non-human and half-human beings. The author wrote that any wizard hunting a werewolf should be wary, because the creatures often travelled in packs. I speculate that it has something to do with their animalistic nature. More beast than man, they appear to be driven by the pack instincts of the wolf to seek safety in numbers. This is, of course, to the determinant of any wizard who may cross into their territory. The passage made Sirius think. Remus seemed to be sure that he would attack anyone nearby when he transformed. But if werewolves didn't attack each other, what about other animals? The disease could only be transmitted from human to werewolf. What if Remus just had other wolves in the house where they kept him, or even a dog? What if he was let out to roam in the woods, away from any students, of course, so that he wasn't all cooped up? Sirius thought that being locked away by yourself sounded horrible, even if it was only for a night. He couldn't imagine how Remus got through it every month. But getting his friend a puppy didn't seem very practical, and Sirius almost abandoned that line of thought until one day in class, when McGonagall transformed into a tabby cat in front of their very eyes. She was explaining the difficulty and dangers of human transfiguration, but Sirius had stopped listening. He was sure that he'd just found the solution to Remus's problem. An Animagus! Sirius Black was going to become an Animagus. Even before the period ended and he had dashed off to the library to research, his resolve had already hardened. No matter how difficult or dangerous it was, he was going to do it. Sirius had to borrow James's invisibility cloak and sneak into the restricted section of the library to find what he needed. Animagi magic was some of the most complicated and risky magic to perform, and the results, if the spell went wrong, were awful. There were several pages of descriptions that turned Sirius's stomach. But no matter. Sirius would just do everything exactly right. He sat in the common room with his forbidden bounty, reading. To his dismay, it appeared that what Animago magic really came down to was just potion making, his least favourite sort of magic by far. There was a lot of ingredient gathering and waiting around involved, and the whole process would take at least 2 months from start to finish. Longer if they included the time it would take to make sure he had collected the ingredients and found all the materials needed for potion brew. Sirius grabbed a spare piece of parchment and began scribbling down a list. Mandrake leaf, deathhead hawk mouth crystals, a silver teaspoon. James and Peter returned from the common room as he was writing. James from Quidditch, Peter from Chess Club. Sirius beckoned them over, and when James saw what he was working on, he groaned. Ugh, not homework. He flopped down onto the couch next to Sirius. Bloody Lupin's bad enough. Don't tell me you're becoming a swot now too. Sirius gave him a playful shove. Oh, ye of little faith. This isn't homework, it's our next mission. James perked up. Really? A new prank? Peter shifted uncomfortably, seating himself in one of the cosy armchairs. But we just did that one with the levitation last week. No, Sirius waved his hand dismissively, moving the book from his lap so that they were able to all crowd around it. This is much more important. It's for Remus. James and Peter listened attentively as he explained his idea, growing more and more animated as he broke out into all of his research and the inspiration that struck when he saw McGonagall turn into a cat. When he was done, he sat back in his chair, awaiting his friend's reactions with a self-satisfied smile. You want us to become Animagi? Peter frowned. Brilliant, crowed James. Absolutely brilliant. But wouldn't we need to register with the ministry? And don't you have to be of age? Sirius rolled his eyes. We're marauders, Pete, he said. We don't have to do anything. But isn't it really dangerous? If you don't want to do it, you don't have to, Sirius snapped, annoyed. Peter cringed, and James jumped in. Yeah, Pete, he said soothingly. It's up to you completely whether you want to do it or not, mate. If you're not comfortable, you could always just help with the collections of the ingredients. Your choice, really. Peter bit his lip, eyes darting between James and the open book on the table. After a moment, he said bravely, I'll do it. No, I'll do it. He nodded and added, I mean, it's for Remus, right? Right, Sirius grinned mischievously. Plus, imagine everything we could get up to as animals. The three of them were bent over the book, discussing the list of ingredients in hushed voices, when the portrait hole opened. Remus stepped through, followed by Lily Evans and her two friends, Mary and Marlene. He'd been spending more and more time with them in the library, although Sirius didn't understand why anyone would want to hang out with the girls. As Mary and Marlene burst into a fit of giggles, and Sirius bid goodbye to Lily, James whispered, Let's just not tell him yet. Not until we're sure there's something we can do. Sirius and Peter nodded, and Peter covered up the book with a sheet of parchment. It wasn't very subtle, and Sirius cringed internally. All right, lads? Remus asked, craning his neck to see what Peter was hiding. What you doing? Nothing, James said cheerily. Where have you been? Before Remus could answer, Sirius said dryly, In the library, with his fan club. He wiggled his eyebrows, but Remus just smirked. Oh, piss off, Black. I know when you're jealous. He glanced back at the table, refusing to change the subject. Seriously, what are you hiding there? Sirius exchanged a look with Peter and James, panicking. They couldn't be caught. What if Remus got his hopes up, and then for some reason they weren't able to do the spell? Sirius needed more time to research, more time to plan. He needed to think of an excuse. Your birthday! Peter suddenly burst out. It's coming up? Yeah, Remus said, looking confused about what that had to do with anything. No, next week. We're planning a surprise, Peter declared, grinning. He looked very proud of himself for coming up with the lie. To be fair, it wasn't really the content that was lacking. It was more the delivery. Sirius caught the look on Remus's face. He knew he didn't buy it in an instant. Still, he dropped it, smile slightly forced as he said, Oh, right. Well, you better not be planning to embarrass me like last year. Oh, no, never, Sirius said jovially, picking up the book and pressing it to his chest, with the title hidden. Are we the sorts of friends who would want to embarrass you, Lupin? Yeah, you are, Remus replied immediately, narrowing his eyes. No singing, no big parties, nothing that's going to get you into trouble, we know, James finished, standing up too. Hey, why don't you invite your new friends, eh? It was good to mix with the fairer sex, don't you think? Right, Sirius said sceptically. More like you want a chance to get Evans on her own. How dare you? James replied indignantly, blushing as he said it. Sirius could tell from the look on Remus's face that he knew they were hiding something from him, but he dropped it for the moment. As they set on teasing James about his fascination with Lily Evans, Sirius clutched the Animagus book to his chest, thinking, Just wait. It'll be worth it, I promise. Chapter 34. Second Year, 13. Sunday, the 4th of March, 1973. Sirius tried to delegate research assignments regarding the Animagi magic to both James and Peter. They needed to make sure that they got everything exactly right before brewing the potions, or else they could end up as a strange half-human, half-animal mutant, which, according to the accounts of the Animagi gone wrong, was a very painful and very short existence. But as March approached, their attention turned to other, more immediate matters, namely, Remus Lupin's birthday. They would have planned something anyway, but since Peter had promised a surprise, Sirius wanted to make sure that they delivered. The weekend before their friend's birthday, they found themselves lying on the floor of the common room next to an abandoned game of exploding snap, brainstorming. We could map some more of the castle. No, we did that last year. Well, what if we asked Madame Hooch? No Quidditch, James, we already agreed. Honeydukes? Sirius rolled his eyes in exasperation. We go there every week. It's got to be a surprise, something he's not expecting. They fell quiet, thinking. James stared at the fire, which crackled with sparks in the grate. Oh, he sat up. I've got it. What? Peter and Sirius asked enthusiastically in tandem. James grinned. Fireworks. What? Let's set off fireworks. Come on, we've been wanting to try out those new lettered ones from Flibberbusters. What if we wrote Happy Birthday or something? Sirius scratched his chin, thinking, Yeah, that's brilliant. It would have to be at night, though, to get the full effect. Midnight. We'll wake him up at midnight, and we can sing Happy Birthday? And what? Go back to sleep? Sirius frowned. James shrugged. We can do something else that Remus likes. Maybe a prank? Yeah, Sirius lay back down, thinking. It should be something that Remus would want to do, something he likes. Peter snorted, grumbling. The only thing Remus likes anymore is his revising and food. James laughed. Remus had promised Peter that he'd quiz him on history at dinner, but he kept trying to talk around bites of food, and eventually Peter had just told him to stop. The smaller boy was a bit annoyed about it, but James and Sirius both thought it was hilarious. Hang on, Sirius said, a slow smile creeping across his face. Peter, that's it! Saturday the 10th of March, 1973. They ended up inviting all the girls, although Sirius wasn't too keen on the idea. James got in his head in the sense that Remus was friends with them now. Friends with a group of girls, and he enjoyed having them there. And once James Potter made up his mind about something, there was very little the rest of the world could do about it. James maintained that it had nothing to do with wanting to spend time with Lily, but Sirius suspected otherwise. More and more recently, he'd been noticing changes in the way his friends behaved towards her. But James had always seemed to get a kick out of antagonising the poor redhead. Now he seemed to be doing less to impress his friends and more to get Lily's attention. He blushed madly whenever one of the other marauders called him out on it, and he'd gotten into the habit of sitting up straighter and mussing up his hair whenever she was around. Sirius found it incredibly annoying. He had older cousins, of course, and he knew that there was supposedly some sort of inebulative draw between women and men that made them all go stupid and moony over each other as adults. The older boys on the Quidditch team did a lot of talking about girls, and James frequently reported back the things that they said to Sirius, giggling nervously and whispering behind the safety of his silencing spell at night. So Sirius knew, subconsciously, that it was cool if you could get girls to like you, which made sense, as Remus was probably one of the coolest people Sirius knew, and he seemed to do it without trying. That it was something that you were supposed to want. But every time he saw Mary and Marlene giggling next to Remus, or James losing all his rational thought in his attempts to oppress Lily, he just got annoyed. He didn't want all his friends getting distracted when he had important marauder business to attend to. Still, he gave in eventually to inviting the girls, and they all seemed very excited about the surprise. Mary even volunteered at James's request to test whether it was safe for them to get into the boys' dormitory. Sirius thought about explaining why that wasn't necessary, but he was pretty sure that James was angling to get Lily alone, and he didn't want to upset his friend. Even though it didn't work, Lily just rolled her eyes and stomped off when he asked. By the time Sunday had rolled around, they'd finished a week's worth of preparations, and all three boys bid Remus good night with broad, excited smiles. Just before the clock struck 12, he and James snuck over to their friend's bed, where Lupin was sound asleep. Sirius held up a finger, wand out, indicating that they should wait. The clock struck 12, and Lumos Maxima! A shock of bright light flooded through the dorm, and they ripped back the curtains around their friend's bed, chanting, "Happy birthday, Lupin!" Remus rubbed his face, looking groggy and startled. "It's still dark out, you pricks," he grumbled, squinting against the light. "It is precisely 1 minute past midnight," Sirius declared, "and therefore officially your 13th birthday. Where's Pete?" Remus climbed out of bed, looking around the room. They've decorated it with extra fairy lights from Christmas, and the streamers that they typically used on Quidditch matches. "On a mission," James answered cryptically. "Come on, get up and dress." "Where are we going?" "Nowhere," Sirius grinned. "But you'll want to be properly attired for when your guests arrive." "My guests?" "Of course," Sirius said jovially. "We tried to keep it Marauders only, but so many people wanted to celebrate with you, see?" Remus gave him a look like he wasn't sure if he was joking, but he pulled on his jeans and a long-sleeved t-shirt all the same. The timing was perfect. He'd just finished when a short knock came at the door. "Come in," James shouted, causing Remus to wince. Sirius quickly explained, "It's okay, we put a silencing spell on the room." Remus frowned. "So whoever's on the other side of that door can't actually hear us then?" James smacked his forehead. "We're complete idiots," he groaned at Sirius, pulling open the door. Peter was outside, smiling and blushing, accompanied by Lily, Mary, and Marlene. Remus's mouth fell open as they entered the room, all grinning broadly, and clearly elated with the surprise. The girls had all brought small cards and packages with them, neatly wrapped. "I didn't think girls were allowed in here. The lovely Mary tested it out for us last week." "Nothing bad seemed to happen," James answered. Sirius shook his head, sighing dramatically. "One day you'll all read Hogwarts a history, and I can finally rest." James began pulling out a package from under his bed, ripping them open. They had amassed a variable wealth of sweets from Honeydukes, Bertie Botts, every flavoured beans, chocolate frogs, whizzing fizzables, Dooble's best glowing gum, strawberry lemons, cauldron cakes, and not to mention the haul that Peter had brought up from the kitchen, ham sandwiches, egg mayonnaise, coronation chicken, cheese and pickle, packets of Remus's favourite coloured crisps, salt and vinegar, green, Scotch eggs, sausage rolls, pork pies, cheese and pineapple sticks, plus some perfunctory fruit. As the two marauders spread out the food, Sirius lay down on the blankets and scattered velvet cushions on the floor. "Lupin," he said, smiling at his friend's shocked expression, "welcome to your midnight feast." "Happy birthday, Remus!" the girls chanted together. They all settled down on the floor, and Sirius placed a record onto his player. Once he'd gotten around to opening his Christmas presents, he'd discovered not one, but 2 Bowie albums from Andromeda, Hunky Dory and The Man Who Sold the World. "Sit next to me, Sirius," Mary chirped as he moved back over. He wasn't sure what difference it made, but he shrugged and did as she said, leaning over to hand Remus his present. "Open this first." He'd made a mess of the wrapping, but he figured it didn't matter much when he was just going to be thrown out anyway. "You didn't have to get me anything," Remus mumbled, predictably, but he obediently untwisted the ends. "A poster?" Lily asked, watching Remus unfurl the thick glossy paper. It was one of Sirius's favourites, a huge A2 print of David Bowie in black and white, wearing a spangly silver costume and giving a slightly jerky high kick. "I got Andromeda to send me one at Christmas," he explained enthusiastically, "but I enchanted it to move myself." He'd spent a bit more time studying the portrait book where he'd found the spell for the lions. The poster couldn't speak, only move, but he still thought it was bloody cool. "Wow," Remus's smile crinkled the corner of his eyes. "Thanks, that's amazing." The girls had bought packets and sweets and cakes, which were added to the enormous pile in the centre of the room. Lily gave him a book on potions, which Sirius thought was stupid. All of Remus's friends knew that potions was his least favourite subject. Remus himself looked sceptical, but Lily just grinned. "Can't keep giving Severus a reason to lord it over you. Please do not mention Snivellus' name on this most sacred occasion," James said with mock horror. Lily rolled her eyes and ignored him, returning to her jam tart. Her dismissal didn't seem to bother James, though. He cleared his throat and looked at Remus, eyes dark and full of mischief. My present is coming later. Once we've all stuffed ourselves to bursting." "Oh, Merlin, Potter," Marlene let out a high-pitched giggle. "What have you got planned?" James mimicked locking his lips and pretended to throw away the key. While Sirius still found the girls' frequent giggling annoying, he had to admit they grew on him as the night went on. He already knew Mary from their potions assignment together, and the two of them quickly fell into comfortable banter. Lily wasn't so bad when she wasn't hanging around with Snape, and Marlene, as much as he wanted to resent her, was able to do the most hilarious impressions of the faculty. It was much harder to dislike her when her imitation of McGonagall had Sirius laughing so hard that he had to gasp for breath. "I'm starting to see why Remus has been abandoning us for you lot," James said, wiping tears of laughter from the corner of his eyes. It was about 1:30 at that point, and Sirius caught James's eye and gave him a meaningful look before turning back to Mary. "Yeah, you're not bad for girls," he said, winking. Mary scoffed and shoved him playfully. Remus rolled his eyes. "Yeah, it's got nothing to do with wanting to get my homework done. Oh, how times have changed." "You'll all be laughing on the other sides of your faces when Remus beats you all in exams," Lily said shyly. "Pah!" James stood, stretching elaborately, commanding the room's attention. "Exams! We marauders have higher concerns. "My dear Mr. Black, Mr. Pettigrew," he swept his arms towards the dorm window. "Shall we?" "By George!" Sirius leapt to his feet. "Is it time?" James nodded solemnly. "Indeed it is." "Then make haste!" Peter cried, clambering up as well. The girls exchanged nervous looks with each other and Remus, who only shrugged. Sirius hurried to the window with James and Peter, heart pounding with excitement, buzzing with energy from all that sugar. He flung the window open, snickering deviously. "Come on," Peter urged, waving the others over. "You'll want to see." James had pulled out the box of bright red fireworks from under his bed, loading both of his arms and Sirius's. "Are those—" Marlene scrunched up her nose. "Not Dr. Flubberbuster's?" James grinned maniacally. "Oh no," Lily cried, dismayed. "We're not supposed to. You'll wake up the whole castle." "Get lost if you don't like it, Evans," Sirius snapped, pressing a few rockets to Peter. He didn't care how much James liked her. He wasn't about to let a stupid girl ruin Remus's birthday surprise. "You promised you wouldn't spoil anything." "Remus," Lily turned to plea. "Tell them, they'll listen to you." "No, they won't," Remus said happily. "Anyway, I want to see." "Oh, you're in for a treat," Sirius winked. "How many do you need?" Mary said, clearly impressed. 13, obviously. "You're all going to get in so much trouble." "Oh, stop being such a goody-goody, Lil." Marlene threw her arm over her best friend. "We won't let any of you girls get in trouble," James said chivalrously, hands too full to push his glasses up as they slipped down his nose. "Don't worry." "I'm not worried," Lily scoffed, folding her arms. "I just think you're all being— Oops! Bang! Peter!" They all looked out of the window to see the rocket that Peter had just dropped tumbling towards the ground in a torrent of green and gold sparks. "Sorry." Peter looked down, sheepish. Sirius laughed. "No, great work. Now we've started, we may as well continue, eh?" Without waiting for a response, he began to hurl his own fireworks out of the window, clear into the night air. James and Peter joined in, and Lily finally fell silent as they all stared, awestruck, the magnificent display of lights exploding in the starry sky. The fireworks exploded multiple times, changing colour as they did so. From red to green to blue, they twisted and whirled, finally curling into letters that spelled out, "Happy 13th birthday, Remu." Sirius shook his head, irritated. He had wanted to leave out 13, but James had insisted. Knew it was too many letters. In addition to being beautiful, the fireworks were appallingly loud. They cracked through the still silence of the night, bursting triumphantly with harsh pops and bangs, crackling as they fizzled out. Throughout the Gryffindor Tower, lights came on and footsteps could be heard as the other students were jolting out of their sleep. Inevitably, McGonagall came out and put an end to their antics, pounding on the door and shouting shrilly, "Potter! Black! Don't think I don't know you're behind this! Open this door!" "Oh shit," James grimaced. "Better get under the beds, ladies." They received a thorough telling off, followed by a series of stern reprimands, and finally a promise that included 2 months of detention and letters home to their parents. Once McGonagall had left, still fuming, the girls snuck out reluctantly, returning to their own dormitory. It was 2 o'clock in the morning by then, and the sugar had worn off. They were all dead on their feet. "Happy birthday, Remus," Peter called out as he drew his curtains, yawning. "Yeah," Sirius echoed, yawning as well. "Happy birthday, Remu." Chapter 35. Second Year. What's in a Name? Monday, the 19th of March, 1973. The full moon that month fell on a Sunday night, so none of the marauders were surprised when Remus didn't show up for class in the next morning. More often than not, he spent the entire day after the full moon in the hospital wing, downing sleeping potions and being fussed over by Madame Pomfrey. He usually let them visit, although sometimes she turned them away. On those days, Sirius knew that his friend had had a particularly bad night, but Remus never complained, even when he returned to their dorm with freshly healed wounds and new bandages. The marauders tried to visit their friend at lunch, but Madame Pomfrey sent them off, immune to their heartfelt pleading. It had been a bad one then. Their classes wore on with no sign of their friend, and Sirius felt a bit guilty. He'd intended to do more research on his Animagus idea, but he'd been so busy marauding with Peter and James that he'd let it fall to the wayside. It wasn't that he was giving up. He was going to do it. Nothing could stop him. It was just that to get started, he needed to sit down and really focus on his research. And that was very difficult to do when you were friends with James Potter. Of course, James cared just as much as Sirius about becoming Animagus, and had more than enough drive and passion when it came to helping their friend. But while James was great at taking charge and inspiring those around him to follow his lead, he often got so caught up in the big picture that he forgot to pay attention to any of the little details. And Animagi magic was very, very detail-orientated. So Sirius had resigned himself to doing the bulk of the research they needed to get started, which was fine, and he just had to find time to actually sit down and do it. The moment their classes ended, the three boys hurried to the infirmary to check in on their friend. In fact, they were in such a rush that Peter, in a moment of distraction, walked smack into a cabinet door that had been left open, causing a couple of bedpans to come clattering out. He winced at the noise. Madame Pomfrey's head popped out from behind the curtains. She'd drawn around Remus's bed. "Mr. Pettigrew," she barked, "what do you think you are doing?" Sorry, Madame Pomfrey, we were just... Pick up those bedpans right now and put them back in that cupboard. And wipe that smirk off your face, Mr. Black. Give him a hand." Sirius abruptly stopped snickering and frowned, but he wasn't about to defy the stern Medi-Witch, so he stooped to help collect the bedpans. James had gone over behind the curtains to talk to Remus, so Sirius nudged Peter with his elbow. "Look out, Pete," he said, slyly. "There's a spider on your shoulder." "What? Where?" Peter jumped, dropping the bedpans that he'd just collected with an awful crash. Sirius attempted to stifle his laughter as Madame Pomfrey marched over, shouting, "Mr. Pettigrew, what did I say?" Peter shot Sirius an irritated look as he apologized once more to the nurse, and Sirius hurriedly shoved his own armful of bedpans back into the cabinet before dashing over to their friends. "Remu!" He whipped the curtain back with a flourish. "You're alive!" Sirius collapsed dramatically to the foot of the bed. I was convinced she was trying to cover up something. That old bat wouldn't let us come over." "Don't call her that," Remus snapped, frowning. "And don't call me that." "But you wanted a nickname," Sirius protested, standing back up. Peter joined them, pouting, hands shoved in his pockets. "No, I didn't," Remus said, furrowing his brow. "I never said that." "Last year," Sirius interrupted him, "almost exactly a year ago, you said you wouldn't mind being called anything as long as it wasn't Looney Lupin." "God, you got a memory like an elephant." Sirius had no idea what that was supposed to mean, but he could figure it out well enough from the context, and Remus was still talking. "Anyway," he said in a hushed voice, "the whole point of having a nickname is so that no one knew who wrote the map. I don't think Remu is going to fool anyone." "He's got a point there," James added. "As much fun as it's been." "Fair enough," Sirius sighed. "But we can call you Remu until we come up with something better." "No. Boring." He tried not to stare at Remus's bandages. A very bad night, it seemed, searching for something else to say. "So, are we getting out of here, or shall we settle down for a rousing game of Snap?" "He's not going anywhere," Madame Pomfrey bustled in. "I'm keeping Mr. Lupin for observation overnight." It was apparently the first that Remus had heard of it, because he immediately protested. "No, I'm feeling much better." Sirius couldn't blame the old nurse for not trusting him. He was pretty sure that even if Remus was bleeding to death, he'd still insist that he was fine. "I'm not being deliberately unkind, Remus," the Medi-Witch sighed. "This is for your health." "I'll go straight to bed." "We'll look after him," James piped up earnestly. Next to him, Sirius nodded, and Madame Pomfrey didn't look convinced. "I'm sorry, Mr. Potter, but no." "Fine," Peter spoke suddenly. "We'll stay here then." "Yeah," James and Sirius agreed. "You'll miss dinner," Remus protested. "I'm sure we can arrange something for just this once," Madame Pomfrey said, finally softening. "All right, boys, but you're to keep quiet and get on with your homework. I'm not having you using Mr. Lupin here as an excuse for not handing anything in." She waved her wand, and suddenly 3 more chairs, along with a wooden desk, had materialized next to Remus's bed. There were even inkwells for their quills. Sirius was impressed. He hadn't realized the old nurse was such a powerful witch. Remus opened his mouth to say something, but before he could speak, Madame Pomfrey shot him a look. "And no, Remus, no homework for you. Just rest." Remus lay back down, looking thoroughly disappointed. Weirdo. "Can I read my book?" he asked meekly. "As long as it doesn't strain your eyes." She finally left, and the marauders sat down and began diligently working on their homework as instructed. This diligence lasted all of 2 minutes, when James caught Remus craning his neck and trying to see what they were doing. As he covered his work with his sleeve and waggled his finger scoldingly, "Ah," tutted James, grinning. "No looking, Remu, you're just to rest." "Ugh, call me loony," Remus groaned. "Anything but Remu." "But it suits you," Sirius said, smirking. "Remu, but it suits you," Sirius smirked devilishly. "Remu, stop it or I'll bite you." "Remu, Remu," Peter joined in, all 3 boys trying to cycle their hysteric giggles so as to not upset Madame Pomfrey. "I hate my name," Remus moaned, covering his face with the book he was reading. "You might as well just call me anything you like. I don't know what could be worse." "Loony, Remu?" James suggested helpfully. "Remoony." Sirius was laughing so hard he could barely breathe. "Remoony," he snorted, collapsing into giggles on the desk. "Moony is actually quite good," Peter said suddenly, brow furrowed in thought. "Eh? Moony, as a nickname?" Remus stared at Peter, lower lip poking out as it always did when he was thinking. He appeared to consider the name, before saying grudgingly, "I don't hate it." "I love it," James declared. "Moony suits you." "Won't people, catch on?" Remus asked, chewing his lip. "Nah," Sirius waved his hand dismissively. "We'll tell them that it's after that muggle in the Who." "They're all muggles in the Who," Remus pointed out, and then, "But I don't play the drums." "You like hitting things?" Sirius suggested. "Thanks." "No problem, Remoony." After dinner, delivered by Madame Pomfrey, James had to leave for Quidditch practice and Peter for a detention, and Sirius was left alone with Remus doing his homework, neither of which proved very entertaining. Remus just wanted to read, and Professor Slughorn wanted an essay on the 17 different uses for beetle shells. Sirius decided to complete his essay later, instead attempting a tentacle arm jinx that he'd once seen Narcissa use. McGonagall had warned them about the dangers that involved with transfigurating humans, even partially, but he figured that since he was already in the hospital wing, there was no better place to try it. Unfortunately, he couldn't quite get the spell right. He wasn't sure what he was doing wrong, but the most success he had was making his arm slightly slimy. He wiped it off on his robe, giving up, and propped his feet up on Remus's bed. "What are you reading, anyway?" "The Epic of Gilgamesh," Remus replied automatically, turning the page. He didn't even glance up, completely immersed in the book. "What's it about?" Sirius tried again. This time Remus looked up. "It's yours," he said, surprised. "I got it off your shelf." "Oh, one of the Muggle ones. I haven't read any of them, to be honest. They were Uncle Alfred's." "Right. So what, Black? What's it about? A man called Gilgamesh?" "Okay, so you have to agree that's a worse name than Remus Lupin." He earned a smile. "Yeah, alright. Suppose it could have always been worse. So tell me about this Goulash bloke." "Gilgamesh. He was a king a long time ago." "See, now I'm hooked. That's how all good stories start." Sirius got comfortable, cupping his head in his hands and waiting for his friend to continue. "No, you're just putting off your astrology essay." "Pfft, I'll copy James's." Sirius grinned. "Tell me more, O keeper of knowledge. I've read to you plenty of times." Remus sighed, but there was still a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Gilgamesh was a king. Yes, a long time ago, you've established that. Look, shut up or piss off." Okay. Sirius held his hands up, surrendering. "Carry on." "So he was a king, but not a good one. He wasn't fully human, so he was stronger than anyone else, and his people were frightened of him. He was dangerous, so his people prayed. That's when you ask gods for help, and the gods sent another man to control Gilgamesh." "Was he even stronger?" "No, but he was part animal." "So the beast man killed Gilgamesh?" "No, they fought each other for a very long time, but Gilgamesh still won. He didn't kill ENKIDU, though. He sort of recognized that they were equals, and they became friends, best friends. And they have these adventures together, fighting other monsters and stuff. It's cool." "I want to know more about this beast man." ENKIDU. He was the master of the animals, and he was happily living in the wild. Even after he's sent to control Gilgamesh, he can't ever go back to nature, so he never really belongs. But he had his friend, right? Yeah, but, well, I don't want to spoil the ending for you. It's okay. I hardly ever read Muggle stuff. He wanted Remus to finish the story. He enjoyed listening. You're missing so much, Remus explained. Okay, alright then. Well, ENKIDU dies. What? Yeah, it's sort of sad. He was my favourite character too. But why? To teach Gilgamesh about death, I think. Before ENKIDU, he was too arrogant to believe anything could hurt him. But after he loses him, he realises that he's not the master of everything. No one can control death. That's a really depressing thought, Moony. Remus shrugged, ducking his head. As he returned to his book, Sirius leaned back, thinking about the story. If he were Gilgamesh, and he had a friend like ENKIDU, he would never let the ending get so bleak. He'd make sure they both lived, and they'd keep having adventures and fighting monsters together right until the very last page.